Yeah, but face it, as it, your very grounded, very well informed, say, vlogger on YouTube is not going to get the same number of followers as the idiot who staples his tongue to his forehead.
Good
It's a very
concern that you're raising.
visual.
That's a very good concern that you're raising.
The world has gone bonkers. We now live in George Orwell's 1984. War is peace, ignorance is strength, and crazy is normal. How do you stay sane? Angela Yu is a social psychologist. She teaches at UP and consults for various corporations. Angela, in your observation, are anxiety and depression on the rise?
It seems so. Based on the data that we have been receiving, the government data that were published, there is a rise in both anxiety and depression, although it could also be attributed to the fact that we are more aware of this.
There's more reporting
psychological
because people
issues.
used to hide these things.
That's right. It used to be the case that there's a lot of taboo in
Yes.
discussing mental issues.
Yeah, and everyone is like, no, I'm fine. There's
Yes,
nothing wrong
nobody
with me."
wants to admit that there's a crack
Yes.
in the psyche. And it's a good thing that now we have the mental health law and people are becoming more aware that it's important to pay attention to mental hygiene, not just physical hygiene.
Right. And so, wait, let's go to the basics. What exactly is anxiety? As in, what does it feel like? Because a lot of us say, "Oh, I'm anxious," but what exactly do we feel? Like in my case, anxiety means I have trouble sleeping, or I feel this strange sense that something terrible is going to happen, but there's no reason why I should be thinking that. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good question because we have what we would term as the layman's conception of anxiety or
Yes.
depression, and what would be defined by the DSM.
Yeah, the
which is like
clinical,
the,
yeah.
Yes, this is the Bible of the psychologists and psychiatrists on how to classify and determine mental health issues.
Yes. So
And
what's anxiety?
Anxiety actually is a manifestation where the individual had certain aroused emotions, and it's also linked to fear. So it's like there are fears around future expectations, not being able to be comfortable with what could be happening in the future.
It's this fear that you may not even know why you're afraid. You're just afraid.
That would be something like a general anxiety disorder. So generalized anxiety disorder would be around that sensing, but not clear-cut idea of what is causing it. Oftentimes, there would be a clear cause for anxiety. Like, for instance, when I'm here discussing something in, say, a public fora, then I might be afraid, I might have anxiety because I may have fear of public speaking. And that's very specific, okay? So what would be symptoms? There could be elevated heart rates, maybe sweating, general sense that the individual is not very comfortable.
Sometimes panic attacks, right?
Yes, even panic attacks where the individual could not seem to have control over certain behaviors like speaking or maybe movements, etc. So you can actually have panic attacks where the individual would freeze in a certain situation.
And then what is depression? Because it's a very common thing to hear people say, "Oh, I'm so depressed." They use it interchangeably with sad. Is that true? Is depression a state of sadness, or is it something more?
What is important here would be to understand that the issue becomes a psychological disorder only if that the individual could not function well.
It prevents
so it's a
you from
dysfunction.
living your life
Yes.
The usual way, yes.
That's right. So, or it could cause harm to the person, individual, or could create or cause harm to others in the society. So there are certain criteria to define whether an individual, by the clinical experts term, psychologically disordered. So that would differentiate between how we generally use, ay, depressed ako. Which is like, oh, medyo sad lang naman. Not depression the way psychologists or psychiatrists would define it. Magkaiba siya.
To a psychology professional, what would the person be like for them to term that person depressed?
Okay. There are several levels of depression. So it could be as simple as dysthymic, meaning there is a short term, maybe weeks or months, where the individual feels low.
Oh, something like what people have in the winter, the seasonal affective disorder.
That's one of the kinds of these depressive disorders or mood disorders that we would call it. And the people would feel low, lethargic, unable, maybe sometimes unable to enjoy the usual, like eating. There could be weight gain or weight loss. There are, I think, 7 or 8 of those symptoms that are listed in the DSM, and usually around 5 of them, if they manifest, would classify the individual as disordered, okay, or a depressive disorder. However, there are, like I mentioned earlier, different levels of depressive disorders or mood disorders. So you have dysthymic, and at the worst level would be major depression, where the individual is unable to function, or
the kind where you can't get out of bed, you're crying all day.
Yes. And then perhaps there could be possibilities of suicidal ideation as well. Perhaps the individual no longer feel meaningful or purposive life, feel any purpose in life.
Yes,
That
it's
would
like
be
the things that used to make them happy no longer have any effect on them.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's one of the classifications as well, or symptoms as well. So things that they no longer enjoy doing. There could be also like they have sort of isolated themselves, no longer interacting with other people, and maybe in a way being more reclusive.
Oh, before we go on, since we're going to be talking a lot, can we offer you something to drink? Water,
Yes, please.
coffee?
Water?
Yes,
Water, please.
Gamba, could you please? Water. This is our assistant, Gamba.
Wow, thank you. Nice abs.
Yes. I'm thinking that some people are probably depressed that they cannot get abs because that's a genetic thing, right?
Or the water. Yes, the abs more than the water.
This is the information age, and we are constantly deluged with information, whether or not we want to hear it. It ranges from important stuff like, this is what a black hole looks like, to things like, oh, this is a piece of lint that I found on my sweater.
That's
so
right.
From the very insignificant to the
mundane,
the
to
really monumental.
yeah.
So does being swamped with information contribute to stress? Because somehow you feel that you have to process all this, and
That's right. Actually, the downside of the information age, where you have everything at your fingertip and sometimes being pushed to you through the different social media, would be that you have to sift through so much. And
Yes.
as human beings, we are what we would term as cognitive misers, meaning we don't like to think. The people who are most academic may not even want to be thinking every day, consciously or unconsciously. But given the situation, people are forced to go through a lot more information than usual. Maybe 20 years ago, we don't have that much at our fingertips even. We have to search for them. That is a huge difference. And sometimes all this information that we have to go through may or may not be helpful to us. So one is selecting or choosing what to look at and what not to look at. So that's effort. The other one would be, what are the things how do we perceive information? Certain information, like for instance, your neighbor posting latest photos of their trip abroad.
Yes.
may create also certain social comparison.
Yes,
such
it's
that
like-
the individual feels,
It's like,
oh
why
no.
are they in Sicily and I am not? Yeah.
That's right. And that actually makes one could create certain moods in the individual, feeling sad, feeling less, having less, or feeling
Yeah, and one hears a lot about how the greatest fear of millennials is the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
It's like, so if you have very bad FOMO, you feel that you have to go through every shred of this information because you might
yes.
miss out on something.
That's right. Because if you miss out, you couldn't tell your stories, and you cannot feel that you belong to that whatever social group you're in.
Which is a terrible way to live, huh?
Definitely, because one cannot stay awake 24/7 just to track what's happening in social
But
media.
I think that they are trying, which is why I feel also that a lot of people lack sleep.
Insomnia.
And they lack sleep, and so this also contributes to the general
yes.
mood disorders, right?
Not being able to sleep well or insomnia is also one symptom of depression.
It's a symptom, not a cause.
It could be sleep deprivation could cause mood issues as well. But on the other hand, if you look at people who are depressive, they tended not to have like the good full 8 hours sleep, so to speak, or they don't feel rested, and sometimes it's a struggle to get themselves to fall asleep. The most recent researches have shown that that's one, next to probably food and a good diet, that's one of the critical things we have to pay attention to as human beings, being able to have our brain rest.
So there's clearly there's a lot we don't know about how our brains and neural systems work.
Well,
For instance, when fake news became a byword, say 2-3 years ago, and everything is fake news this, fake news that, it emerged that people who believe in fake news, if you confront them with the facts, it will not change their minds.
no.
They decide that no, this fake news is the real news. It's this thinking that I am right, as in my beliefs shape
It's a cognitive-
my view of reality.
It's a cognitive bias. We tend to miss out or agree with things that seem to align or that are similar to what we believe in. So we tend to be less likely to be as careful to identify, or maybe we tend not to easily to be as able to identify mistakes when it's something similar to what we believe in.
Yeah, and so you brought up the term cognitive bias, which
Yes.
is such a fascinating idea, because bias implies that people will think what they want to think regardless of the reality. Cognitive biases are not necessarily bad. They're survival mechanisms.
Yes, except that sometimes they are no longer appropriate because our world
Because
today
times
is,
have changed, yes.
and sometimes, especially in this digital world, there's a need to not be afraid, but rather ride this waves of change to be able to cope up with how the world is evolving. And then that's where the issues come in, even at the workplace level of the individual
Basically, cognitive biases are how we explain the world to ourselves.
or to others.
So everybody has cognitive biases.
Oh, yes.
No
Everybody
one
has.
is, well, since
Even
Mr. Spock is
experts.
not amongst us, I guess.
Even experts have cognitive biases.
Even people who think they are super rational.
Have cognitive biases. What is important actually is being able to catch your own bias, being able to step back,
Yeah, that's the
dissociate for
thing.
what you
How do
strongly feel
people
about.
spot their personal biases?
It's easy to say, just be more open-minded. But how do you manifest open-mindedness? Probably by asking more questions, by being more curious. So a lot of it has to do with how we handle facts and how we handle situations, in being conscious that there could be an alternative explanation to anything.
In other words, human beings are completely incapable of being objective.
Yes, in
Everything
certain...
is through a filter.
Oh yes, we all have filters. It's whether we admit we have them or are we conscious that we have them. That's what matters.
Yeah, so going back, we were talking about fake news earlier. So it's important to us to have some kind of expert or authority that we can look to for guidance. But then, how do we know whom to believe in at a time when all our beliefs are being dismantled? For instance, the belief that if you study hard and get good grades, you can get into a really
Yes,
good
world.
Ivy League school. And then now we find that you can game your way into an Ivy League
Oh,
school.
yes.
So the meritocracy does not exist.
Yes.
So who are we
Or
going to
maybe
believe
does
now?
not always exist. It also depends on how we sift through data.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the more important thing is to equip people with the ability to look through information in a way that they can differentiate what is plausible and what could be faked. In essence, it's about critical thinking. So education is important. Training people to think rather than, slide into making judgments without processing things, which is the easy way out.
Everybody gets their information from social media now, and so the generators of content and information, they'll try to get some sort of clickbait.
Yes.
So the information gets warped and twisted.
That's
because their goal is to get people to look. So
Yeah, because it's business.
it's
right?
misrepresented somehow.
And it serves a purpose, which is business. And sometimes what one needs to know would be how perhaps follow certain say bloggers or certain news sources
Influencers.
oh yeah, that's a new term.
Yeah.
Influencers that are more reliable than others have or would probably have stronger database than others.
Yeah, but face it, your very grounded, very well informed, say, vlogger on YouTube is not going to get the same number of followers as the idiot who staples his tongue to his forehead.
Good
It's a very
concern that you're raising.
visual.
That's a very good concern that you're raising. At the moment, I think fake news abounds, mainly because we have all sorts of media that reaches the end user quickly. And obviously, an end user that's not discerning will tend to also magnify or expand on that reach or network by reposting, sharing, etc. Therefore, making it maybe real news to others because it's been posted by so many people. Majority wins, or that's why we say majority is not always right. I don't know. Do you have a solution for that?
Well, the solution I was thinking of before was that's it. We're going to have to colonize another planet. And and we all move there and try not to commit the same mistakes, except that we will be taking these same brains and these same cognitive biases to the new planet where we will replicate probably the exact same conditions that we are fleeing.
That's very possible. If you look at cognitive biases, we cannot exactly clear out 100% all of those. And sometimes they also have certain purposes. It serves a purpose to be biased maybe towards the in-group, because otherwise, if you don't support your own in-group, will you get a support system, right? There are certain situations where the cognitive biases are there for a function, even in this 21st century world. However, what is important is how to avoid having those cognitive biases create a world that's harmful to more people or to a larger group of people. That, like racial discrimination, gender discrimination, which has been there.
Politicians. Do you think that politicians should undergo mandatory psych evaluation?
It would be a good move considering that their role entailed a lot of cognitive functions, meaning they had to make good judgments and their decisions actually impact on the entire populace of a certain nation and maybe even globally. So if you think about certain people who are psychologically imbalanced or mentally challenged,
Or just cuckoo?
well, yes, and depend on them to make certain critical decisions and those decisions actually could cause harm, then
Yes.
it makes sense to have them go through a certain process of evaluation.
But of course, if anyone even suggests, I think politicians should undergo mandatory psych evaluation, they will all shout, "Ay, that's politically motivated." And then we do not trust the evaluator because obviously the evaluator is working for the other side. So
that's a good point. And if you look at that situation, who should be pushing for it? I recall that I think 2 or 3 elections ago, there was actually a suggestion to create a job description type of evaluation for certain leaders. And certain outfits in media came up with an assessment of how people or the candidates fared against all those criteria set out, depending on the role that the individual or the position is supposed to perform. That would have been a good way of, or very objective way of assessing candidates, because in business, that's what we do. We look at all applicants and try to see who is best for certain positions, and to ensure that they can perform well in the role, which is what politicians are supposed to do. A lot of people don't listen. There's a lot of vested interest in certain, especially in the political realm. So if you look at it, it's a very good suggestion. How do you operationalize it? Who gets, like what you mentioned, who gets to make all those assessments becomes an issue. However, if you look at what was done previously, if you have several organizations coming up with their own evaluations, like people who are in, I think, if I'm not mistaken, MAP and PMAP also came up with their own, and I think they still do those things. It could be used as a guide, but if you want it stipulated in the law and require all candidates to go through a process of evaluation, I'm thinking that it might be an uphill climb, and it might be seen to also be a bias.
Discriminatory, exactly.
Yeah, maybe in favor of people who are better at,
or people who came from certain schools or have certain
who have better
certain
perks,
types of
better
education
opportunities,
and so on. Yeah. So let's go to solutions that we can do now. Like, for instance, what do you do when you feel? Do you ever get anxious or?
Oh yeah,
So
I was
how
anxious a while ago.
How do you get over it?
I would suggest deep breathing. I always, in my talks with different people, I always tell them, number one, when you want to remove anxiety, is to breathe deeply, because in breathing deeply, you slow down the heart rate. You also are, and by slowing down the heart rate, your brain actually would read it to be calmer. So you can become calmer as a consequence. Okay. The other thing would be to process the situation. Why am I anxious? Oh, I'm afraid because I'm facing Jessica Zafra, and
I recommend keeping a journal. Seriously, as in you can track. You can attempt an explanation of what is happening to you, or at least track the way your brain works. And also, I discovered that if you read your journal months or years later, you realize that you were making a big deal over something that was really
making a mountain
minor.
out of the molehill.
Exactly.
Yes.
It gives you perspective.
I would often recommend journaling, especially for people who are depressive as well. The humor journal. So every day you think up or look for 3 situations that are funny, so you could have a short laugh. That would immediately alleviate the mood.
Yeah.
The other one would be a gratitude journal. This one worked for me.
Yeah. There was a period when I was really glum, and I thought, this is so baduy, the whole idea of saying thank you for stuff. But I have to admit, it works.
Yes.
Yeah, please explain to us again what a gratitude journal is.
So every day, at the end of the day, you think back through your day and look for like at least 3 situations that you're very thankful for. It could be as complex as somebody came in, maybe an angel came in and helped you through a major problem, or it could also be as simple as somebody allowing you to park extra time, like what happened right now. And by looking at all those things, you're able to see that the world is not so harsh after all. There are good things there. And that will bolster your sense that no, depression is basically coming from the idea that there's nothing, the world is a bad place. And therefore, you're able to affirm to yourself that, hey, there are so many good things that's happening. There are so many good people around who are helpful or kind. There is a research that says that you can take it one step further by writing a thank you letter to whoever you're grateful for. And that ensures that the recipient of that letter gets a thank you and feels happy. So you see, it's passing it forward. Somebody does something to you and it made like, your life better. And
dear parking lot, thank you for not towing my car away.
Or dear MNDA, thank you for giving me 10 more minutes.
Yeah, or I have to write a letter to my cat, who's actually a host on the show. Dear Drogon, thank you for bringing me a cockroach the other day at breakfast, because I know that he really enjoyed killing it. So
oh yeah,
and then he offered it to me. So
passing it forward, or doing something for other people would be something that would expand that sense of gratitude, or influence others to have that sense of that positive feel. So maybe with the cat, I would give it an extra treat.
Oh no, he's already spoiled. But something as simple as, well, today I ran into this guy I knew in high school, and he used to be hot, and now, he's not.
Well, that could be a way.
Although that's also Schadenfreude.
That could, I think that at the end of the day, how we look at the world affects how we feel about it and how we feel about ourselves. So in certain situations, that could help. But in the long run, being more concrete about certain things, doing things that will generate positive feel, and being more positive in general, could help you become less depressed and feel more that life is more meaningful. I think connecting the dots from the idea that we're anxious, we're depressed, there's a lot of that lately, and then looking at fake news, etc. Where's the world going to? The important thing is, how do we connect with each other? How do we find meaning around our lives? Being able to generate that for ourselves and helping others find meaning, purpose, and feeling that connection is very important.
Yes.
While social media allowed people who are far from us to reconnect with us, what it also failed to do is to connect people who are around us. Because now we're always too busy with our gadgets and not paying attention to people around us.
Sometimes, you go into restaurants, it's a table of 12, and no one is speaking to each other because they're all looking at their phones.
And I'm guilty. In our family, sometimes we find ourselves in exactly that scenario, and somebody would just say, hey, we're all on the gadgets again, nobody's talking. So it's a good thing.
Maybe there
to
has to be
remind
some
each
kind
other.
of timeout, like, okay, phones down. We'll have an actual conversation, and then you stare at each other because you can't think of what to say.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? I've heard, and I think I've seen videos where in certain gatherings, get-togethers, the whole barkada would put all their phones in the middle of the table, and the first one who could not resist getting the phone will
pays the bill.
Yes. See,
That's
that works, right?
Idea.
And that would force people to interact with each other more.
That is good.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is, if you're not aware, Facebook actually has this monitoring tool. So if you want just to have 2 hours a day on Facebook, you can actually configure that on Facebook.
So
they will
shut down after.
I wish it would shut down. But what they would do is to warn you, okay, you've hit 2 hours. Are you still going to continue or not?
They should add a shutdown function in the social media.
There may be apps around also for that, to shut down Facebook. But sometimes, human beings, we're really frail beings. We like to indulge ourselves
That's true.
a lot.
Yeah. And so, anyway, my cognitive bias says we should hang out. I have, I have thoughts that I want you to interpret. But
Sure,
thank you very
sure.
much for joining us today.